The trays were heavy, cutting into the callus forming at the base of my thumb, a constant, dull throb that reminded me of exactly where I was in the world. The restaurant was a cavern of low light and high stakes, the kind of place where the air conditioning was kept freezing to preserve the immaculate makeup of women who had never scrubbed a floor in their lives. I adjusted the collar of my uniform, the stiff fabric scratching against my neck, and kept my eyes trained on the floor tiles. Invisibility was the currency I traded in now. For 3 years, I had been a ghost, a shadow drifting through the service entrances of a city that didn't care to learn my name. I was Zara here. Just Zara. Not the woman who had once worn silk that cost more than my current annual rent. Not the woman who had run into the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and a terrifying secret curled in her belly. My manager, a man with grease in his pores and disdain in his eyes, snapped his fingers near my ear, startling me out of the mental fog. He pointed toward the VIP section, the raised platform bathed in golden light where the shadows were deepest and the privacy most expensive. Table 4 needs water. Don't embarrass me, he hissed. I nodded, swallowing the metallic taste of anxiety that coated my tongue. I grabbed the crystal pitcher, the condensation slick against my palms, and began the long walk across the velvet carpet. The sound of silverware clinking against china sounded like tiny alarm bells. I focused on the water swirling in the pitcher, on the rhythm of my breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. It was the only thing holding my ribcage together. Then I saw the back of the head. The cut of the hair was precise, surgical, black ink against the dim light. The shoulders were broad, encased in a suit that I knew, with sickening certainty, was Italian bespoke. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my sternum, a trapped bird desperate to break the bone. I froze, the water trembling in the glass vessel. It couldn't be. The city was too big, the world too chaotic for fate to be this cruel. Then he turned his profile to the light, and the air left the room.
Juno.
He was laughing, a sound I hadn't heard in years, low and smooth like polished obsidian. It was a lie, of course. His laughter was always a performance, a social lubricant he applied before he twisted the knife. Beside him sat a woman, a vision of porcelain perfection, her long dark hair cascading over shoulders wrapped in cream cashmere. She was Korean, beautiful in a fragile, bird-like way that made my stomach churn with a mix of pity and nausea. She was smiling at him, her hand resting on his forearm, displaying a diamond that caught the overhead light and fractured it into 1,000 mocking rainbows. It was the ring. Not the exact one I had left on the bedside table 3 years ago, but a cousin to it, a symbol of ownership disguised as a promise. I couldn't move. My feet were lead, rooted to the plush carpet. I needed to turn around, to drop the pitcher, to fake a faint, anything to escape the orbit of the black hole sitting at table 4. But the manager was watching me from the shadows near the kitchen, his eyes narrowed. If I walked away, I lost the job. If I lost the job, I lost the apartment. If I lost the apartment, I lost safety for the one person who mattered. I forced my legs to move, each step a wading motion through molasses. I approached the table from the left, keeping my head bowed, so low my chin touched my chest. The scent hit me before I even reached them. Sandalwood, cold rain, and the faint, coppery tang of something dangerous. It was the smell of my nightmares. Water, sir? My voice was a rasp, unrecognizable even to me. I poured without looking up, watching the liquid rise in the crystal goblet, praying the tremble in my hand wouldn't betray me. Junho didn't look at me. He was too busy looking at her, at Sumin, his eyes crinkled in a facsimile of adoration. Thank you, he said, the politeness of his tone chilling my blood. He didn't know. He didn't know. I finished pouring for Sumin, who offered a distracted smile, her attention entirely fixed on the man who would eventually consume her. I turned to leave, the relief washing over me so violently I nearly stumbled. Wait, the word was soft, spoken at a volume that required no effort, yet it stopped me as effectively as a physical blow. I stopped, my back to them, clutching the empty pitcher against my stomach like a shield. The restaurant noise seemed to drop away, leaving only the hum of the ventilation and the roaring of blood in my ears. "You missed a spot," Junho said. I turned slowly, fighting the urge to bolt for the fire exit. He was pointing a manicured finger at the tablecloth, where a single, tiny droplet of water had marred the pristine white linen. It was a test. It was always a test with him. I reached for the napkin in my apron pocket, my hand dark against the white cloth, shaking visibly now. As I leaned in to dab the moisture away, the sleeve of my uniform rode up slightly, revealing the inside of my wrist. There, faded but visible, was the small, jagged scar from the day I had tried to scale the garden wall of his estate, the first time I tried to leave. I saw his eyes drop to it. The world stopped. The ambient chatter, the clatter of plates, the jazz music, it all vanished into a vacuum of absolute terror. Junho went still. It was a predator's stillness, total and terrifying. His gaze traveled up from my wrist, past the cheap polyester of my uniform, up to my neck, and finally, he forced my eyes to meet his. The recognition didn't hit him like a shock. It washed over him like a dark satisfaction. The mask didn't slip, it hardened. His pupils dilated, swallowing the iris, black holes absorbing the light. "Zara," he whispered, the name tasting like a curse on his tongue. Sumin blinked, looking between us, confused by the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure. "You know the waitress, darling?" she asked, her voice light and airy, oblivious to the fact that she was sitting next to a bomb that had just been armed. Junho didn't break eye contact with me. A small, cruel smile touched the corner of his mouth. "An old acquaintance," he said smoothly, his voice dropping an octave. "I didn't know she was serving these days." The humiliation was a physical heat, burning my cheeks, but it was secondary to the primal fear that told me to run. "I need to get more water," I stammered, backing away, forgetting the protocol, forgetting the manager, forgetting everything but the need for distance. "Stay," Junho commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a calm statement of fact, delivered with the assurance of a man who has never been disobeyed. He picked up his menu, but his eyes never left my face. "Actually, we're ready to order." "Sumin, my love, have you decided?" He was playing with me. He was enjoying the terror radiating off me in waves. Sumin giggled, a tinkling sound that grated against my nerves. "Oh, I don't know. Everything looks so heavy. Maybe just the sea base." She looked at me, her smile genuine and kind, which made it worse. She was me 3 years ago. "The sea base, please," she said. I nodded, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip the pen with white-knuckled force. "And for you, sir?" I managed to ask, staring at the knot of his tie. "Steak," he said, his voice heavy with double meaning. "Rare. Bloody. And a bottle of the '96 Cabernet. You remember the one, don't you, Zara? The one we had on our anniversary." It wasn't a question. It was a psychological flaying. He was rewriting history in front of his new fiancée, taunting me with memories of a time when I thought his possessiveness was passion. "I'll put the order in," I whispered. I turned and walked away, focusing on keeping my knees from buckling. I could feel his eyes on my back, a physical weight, burning through the cheap fabric of my uniform. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went straight to the employee locker room, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I needed to leave. Now. I couldn't go back to that table. I fumbled with the lock on my locker, my fingers slippery with sweat. I grabbed my purse, my coat, leaving my tips, leaving my apron. I had to get to the daycare. I had to get her. If he knew I was here, if he found out about. I couldn't finish the thought. It was too terrifying. I burst out of the back door into the alleyway, the humid city air hitting me like a wet towel. The smell of garbage and exhaust was a comfort after the sterile chill of the restaurant. I fumbled for my phone, my thumb hovering over the rideshare app, but my signal was dead. I cursed, looking up at the towering brick walls that boxed me in. "Going somewhere?" The voice came from the shadows near the dumpster. My phone clattered to the pavement. I spun around, my back hitting the metal door. 2 men stepped out of the darkness. They weren't wearing restaurant security uniforms. They were wearing black suits, identical to the ones Junho's bodyguards always wore. The earpieces, the bulges under the jackets, I knew these men. I didn't know their names, but I knew what they were. Mr. Park would be very disappointed if you left without saying goodbye, the taller one said, his face a blank slate of professional violence. I'm not going with you, I said, trying to summon the defiance that had gotten me out 3 years ago. I'll scream. I'll scream right now, the second man stepped forward, holding up a phone. On the screen was a live video feed. My blood turned to ice. It was the exterior of a small, familiar building. The daycare. No. I breathed, the word shattering as it left my lips. Don't you dare, the man smiled, a cold, humorless expression. The car is waiting, Ms. Zara. Please, don't make a scene. You know how much he hates scenes. I looked at the phone, then at the alley exit. There was no choice. There never had been. He had checkmated me before I even knew the game had restarted. I slumped, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I had to survive this. For her. I nodded, stepping over my fallen phone, leaving it buzzing on the wet asphalt. They marched me to the waiting black SUV, a behemoth of armor and tinted glass idling at the curb. The back door opened before I reached it, revealing the cavernous, leather-clad interior. I climbed in, the smell of new leather and that damnable sandalwood cologne enveloping me instantly. Junho was already there, sitting in the corner, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. The partition was up. We were alone. As the door slammed shut, sealing us in, the silence was louder than a scream. He didn't look at me immediately. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the vortex. You look tired, Zara, he said softly, his voice vibrating through the quiet space. Working on your feet all day. It doesn't suit you. I pressed myself against the opposite door, wishing I could melt into the upholstery. What do you want, Junho? I asked, my voice trembling but clear. You have a fiancé. You have a life. He finally looked at me then, and the intensity of his gaze made me feel like I was naked. I have a fiancé, he agreed, tilting his head. Sumin is suitable, obedient. But she isn't you. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face. I flinched, bracing for a blow, but his fingers merely grazed my cheekbone, a touch that was terrifyingly gentle. Why did you run? He asked, as if asking about the weather. I gave you everything. A palace. Gold. Safety. It was a cage. I spat, the anger flaring up through the fear. And I would rather starve in the street than be your pet. His eyes hardened, the softness evaporating. He leaned forward, encroaching on my space, suffocating me. And yet, he murmured, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, here you are. Starving. Serving others. And wearing cheap shoes that hurt your feet. He glanced down at my worn sneakers, then back up to my eyes. Where is it, Zara? The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Where is what? I feigned ignorance, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought he could see it through my shirt. The money? He laughed then, a dry, sharp sound. I don't care about the money you took. You know what I'm asking? He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. Where have you been hiding for 3 years? And who have you been hiding with? Nobody. I lied, the word tasting like ash on my tongue. I kept my gaze fixed on the leather partition, refusing to look at the man who had once been my entire world. The car hummed beneath us, a silent beast cutting through the rain-slicked streets of the city that had failed to hide me. Junho sighed, a sound of disappointment that grated against my nerves more than his anger ever could. He shifted his weight, the leather creaking, and I felt the heat of his body move closer. His hand, warm and heavy, landed on my knee, his fingers curling possessively over the rough fabric of my work trousers. I stiffened, every muscle in my body locking up, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. To pull away was to invite a chase, and I had no energy left for running. Nobody, he repeated, testing the weight of the lie. His thumb began to stroke the inside of my knee in a slow, rhythmic circle, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. You were never a good liar, Zara. You wear your heart in your eyes. It's why I fell for you. It's why I kept you." He leaned in, the scent of expensive whiskey and sandalwood overwhelming my senses, drowning out the smell of the grease and stale cleaning fluid that clung to my uniform. "I have a life, Junho," I whispered, my voice trembling. "A quiet life. I don't want your world. I don't want the blood, or the money, or the fear." He laughed softly, his breath ghosting against the sensitive skin of my neck. "Fear," he murmured, his lips brushing against my pulse point. "I never gave you fear, Jagia. I gave you power. I gave you worship. It was you who turned it into fear because you were afraid of how much you liked it." His words were a poisoned dart, striking true. I closed my eyes, fighting the traitorous memory of his hands on me in the dark, the way he would worship my body like a holy relic, the way his obsession had felt like the only safety in a chaotic world until it became a prison. "And what about her?" I asked, deflecting, grasping at the image of the woman in the restaurant. "Sumin. She thinks you're a businessman. She thinks you're kind." Junho pulled back slightly, just enough to look me in the eye. His expression was bored, dismissive. "Sumin is a merger. A signature on a contract. She is porcelain, pretty to look at, easy to break, and entirely hollow." He reached up and tucked a loose curl of my hair behind my ear, his touch lingering on my cheek. "You are not porcelain, Zara. You are iron. You are the fire that burns the house down. Did you really think a diamond ring on another woman's finger would change what you are to me?" The car slowed, the gravity of the turn pulling me toward him, and then we were descending. The light from the street lamps vanished, replaced by the clinical, fluorescent glare of a private underground garage. I knew this building. I knew the silence of these concrete walls. My stomach dropped as the car came to a smooth halt. The lock clicked open, but I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Home," Junho said, the word heavy with finality. He stepped out, his movements fluid and commanding, and extended a hand to me. It wasn't an offer, it was a summons. I looked at his hand. The large palm, the long, elegant fingers that could snap a man's wrist or paint a masterpiece, and then I looked at the security details standing by the elevator. There was no escape. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed over mine, tight, warm, an iron shackle wrapped in velvet. He pulled me out of the car, not roughly, but with an inexorable force that told me I was no longer Zara the waitress. I was his again. We walked to the elevator in silence, the echo of our footsteps the only sound in the cavernous garage. He didn't let go of my hand. He held it against his chest, right over his heart, forcing me to feel the steady, slow beat of it. "You're trembling," he noted as the elevator doors slid shut, sealing us in a box of gold and mirrors. "I'm cold," I lied again. He turned to me, blocking out the reflection, blocking out the world. He began to unbutton his suit jacket, his eyes never leaving mine. "Then let me warm you." He draped the heavy jacket over my shoulders, the silk lining instantly warming my skin. It smelled intensely of him, a sensory overload that made my knees weak. "I missed this," he whispered, stepping into my personal space until our bodies were touching. "The way you look at me like you want to kill me or kiss me. I haven't decided which I prefer." The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, revealing a sprawling expanse of marble, glass, and dark wood. It was exactly as I had left it 3 years ago, a mausoleum of wealth preserved in amber. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city skyline, a billion glittering lights that represented millions of people who were free, while I stood in a tower of gold, trapped. Junho guided me into the living room, his hand shifting to the small of my back, searing heat through the fabric of my uniform. "I hate this thing," he murmured, pinching the cheap polyester of my waitress blouse. "It smells of other people. It smells of servitude." He walked me to the center of the room and turned me to face him. The city lights cast long shadows across his face, making him look like a beautiful, vengeful god. "Go and change," he commanded softly. "Your closet is untouched. The silk robes, the dresses. I burned nothing. I threw nothing away." I stared at him, horror and fascination warring in my chest. You kept everything? I asked. For 3 years. He smiled, a dark, twisted expression that chilled me to the bone. I knew you would return. Birds always return to the nest. Even if they fly into a storm first, he walked over to a crystal decanter and poured a glass of dark red wine. Go. Wash that scent off your skin. Put on something that feels like you. When you come back, we will eat. Real food. Not the scraps you've been living on. I retreated to the master bedroom, my legs moving on autopilot. The room was a sanctuary of soft grays and deep blues, the bed massive and imposing. I walked into the walk-in closet and my breath hitched. It was true. My clothes were there. The emerald silk gown he had bought me for my birthday. The cashmere sweaters. The rows of shoes. It was as if I had died, and this was a shrine to my memory. I stripped off the waitress uniform, leaving it in a heap on the floor, and stepped into the shower. I scrubbed my skin until it was pink, trying to wash away the fear, trying to wash away the restaurant, trying to wash away the last 3 years of struggle. But I couldn't wash away him. He was under my skin, in my blood. I wrapped myself in a robe of midnight blue silk, the fabric cool and slippery against my skin, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like the woman I used to be, pampered, expensive, owned. But my eyes were different. They were harder. Haunted. I walked back out to the living room. Jun-ho was waiting on the velvet sofa, his tie loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked up as I entered, and the hunger in his eyes was naked and terrifying. Better, he breathed, setting his glass down. Much better. You look like a queen again. My queen, he patted the cushion beside him. Sit, I sat, keeping a careful distance, but he simply slid closer, bridging the gap until his thigh pressed against mine. The food is coming, he said. But first, we need to discuss the future. There is no future, I said, gripping the lapels of my robe. I have to go back. I have. Responsibilities. Responsibilities, he mused, tasting the word. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, black smartphone. He tapped the screen and held it up for me to see. The blood drained from my face, leaving me dizzy. It was a photo. A high-resolution, candid photo taken from a distance. It was of a little girl playing in a park, her curly hair bouncing as she chased a pigeon. Her skin was a blend of rich cocoa and honey, her eyes shaped like almonds, dark, intelligent, intense. My daughter, Amani. She is beautiful, Jun-ho said softly, his voice filled with a strange kind of wonder. She has your nose. Your defiance. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his composure. His eyes were shining with a dangerous emotion. Did you think I wouldn't know? He whispered. Did you think you could hide my blood from me? I lunged for the phone, a feral sound ripping from my throat, but he caught my wrists easily, holding them in one hand. She's mine, I hissed, tears streaming down my face. She's nothing to do with you. I left before I knew. I raised her. She doesn't know you. Jun-ho pulled me closer, pinning my hands to his chest. She will, he vowed, his voice a low rumble. She is a park. She is royalty. And you had her living in a closet? Wearing secondhand clothes? While I sat here in a palace. His anger flared then, hot and righteous. You stole 3 years from me, Zara. 3 years of her life. I should punish you for that. But I won't, he continued, his voice dropping back to that terrifyingly gentle caress. He released my wrists and cupped my face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. Because you gave me her. And because you are here now, I shook my head, sobbing silently. Please, Jun-ho, let us go.
She's happy.
She's safe. Safe? He scoffed. In that neighborhood? With a daycare that has a broken lock on the back gate?
No.
She was never safe. She was vulnerable. Just like you, he leaned his forehead against mine, his eyes boring into my soul. Here's the deal, Zara. Listen closely, because I will only offer it once. I stopped breathing, waiting for the cage to snap shut. You stay. Here. With me. You resume your place at my side. Not as a mistress, not as a secret. As my wife. We will marry. Properly this time. The engagement to Suman ends tonight. I try to pull back, but he held me firm. And Amani, he said the name with possessive reverence. Amani comes home. She will have the best schools, the best security. She will never know hunger. She will never know cold. She will be the princess of this city. He paused, letting the offer hang in the air, glittering and poisonous. Or, his eyes darkened, you can try to leave again. But if you do, I will take her. I have the lawyers, the judges, and the money to prove you are unfit. I will take sole custody, and you will never see her again. The ultimatum hung between us, a blade pressed against my throat. He wasn't bluffing. I knew he wasn't bluffing. He could erase me from the world with a phone call. He could take Amani and turn her into a stranger, a cold, ruthless creature like him. Or I could stay. I could step back into the gilded cage, wrap myself in the silk and the diamonds, and protect her from the inside. I could be the buffer between his darkness and her light. I looked at the photo on the phone, at Amani's innocent joy, and then I looked at Junho. He was watching me with that same predatory patience, but beneath it, there was something else, a desperate, twisted need. He didn't just want to own me, he wanted me to choose him. He wanted the fantasy of the happy family, bought with blood and blackmail. My heart shattered, piece by jagged piece. I had lost. I had lost the moment he saw the water spot on the table. Okay, I whispered, the word barely a breath. Okay. Junho exhaled, a long, shuddering sound of relief. He pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his chest. It wasn't a hug of comfort. It was a hug of conquest. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply, his lips pressing hot, wet kisses to my skin. Good, he murmured against my throat. Good. You'll see, Jagia. It will be better this time. I will give you the world. I will burn the rest of it down for you. I let my head fall onto his shoulder, staring blankly out the window at the city lights. They looked different now. They weren't stars of freedom anymore. They were the bars of my cell. But as his hand stroked my hair, gentle and rhythmic, and the warmth of his body seeped into my cold bones, a treacherous part of me, the part that had loved him before the fear, the part that craved the monster's protection, relaxed. I was trapped. I was a prisoner. But for the first time in 3 years, I didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me.